When you take beer, as you all know, is made from barley malt, and then hops come in later. When you take barley malt extracts and you put the yeast on it and it ferments, it usually starts out looking very thick and cloudy. Nobody really wants to drink that, so they need to store it in casks for some weeks, or sometimes for several months. And they store it, and it gradually clears itself. All the sediment, all the mucky stuff that's making it cloudy, gradually drops down out of suspension into the bottom of the cask, and the beer looks clear. It looks what they call fine. Okay? So the brewers talk about this as fining the beer. But this means, because the beer is tied up for weeks or months, this means that the brewers get a really, really slow return on their investment. So they hire chemists to try and find something that will get the beer to go fine more quickly. One of the things they try is oil of vitriol, which we know as sulfuric acid. This is not particularly popular. They try a lot of other things, and you know what the best answer they managed to come up with was? Obviously, it was fish. Okay? You get a particular kinds of fish, the sturgeon. The sturgeon turns out to be the best one. If you know the sturgeon for anything else, it's probably caviar. Okay, so the fish that caviar is the eggs of sturgeon. So you get your sturgeon, gut it, throw your caviar away. That's no good to you. It's not what you're interested in. Chuck the caviar out. Concentrate on the swim bladder and maybe one or two of the other bits. So it turns out you can take the swim bladder, dry it, chop it up, right? Dissolve it in acidic sour beer, and you can make kind of a gluey substance, which, when you tip it into a cask full of cloudy beer, first of all it spreads across the surface of the beer, then it kind of gradually trickles down, it forms a sort of a gluey net, and it pulls everything that's in suspension in the beer, it pulls it out down to the bottom of the cask, and it leaves the beer perfectly clear. And it'll do that in about a day for you. So that's obviously you're making an excellent saving there in terms of time. And the beer, by the way, doesn't end up tasting of fish unless you use an enormous amount of isinglass, more than you can possibly need. Now, this is technically illegal. Technically, you're not allowed to make beer out of anything at all except for malt and hops, right? The government insists on that, right? But the government, that's nothing to do with safety or public health or anything like that. It's just that malt and hops are the two things that the government puts the tax on. So it doesn't like, the government doesn't like you using anything else that you could use to substitute for the malt and the hops, but it doesn't really care about things like isinglass, because that's not substitution. The only problem is you can't farm sturgeon here. You've got to ship them in, either from Russia or from North America, which of course after 1776 we're a bit short on North America. We've not got as much of it as we would ideally like. And by the 1800s, isinglass from sturgeon has got really, really expensive. So all the brewers are casting around for other fishy substitutes. And in 1809, one of the big London breweries, that's Brown and Parry's brewery on Golden Lane, gets a local yeast dealer called James Butcher to see if he can make a substitute. So Butcher goes to all the local fishmongers, and obviously the fishmongers fillet a lot of their fish, so they throw skins away. And this man comes around offering them money for fish skins, right? Well, what would you do? Obviously, they grab his hand off, and he takes away all these fish skins to his workshop, and he starts rubbing them through a sieve and dissolving the flaked skins in stale beer. And this process smells pretty much as you would expect. They do this, Butcher and the people he's working with do this at their own workshop, which is just opposite the brewery, and it's next door to the excise office. Now the excise are the people responsible for watching the brewers to make sure they're paying enough tax. And the excise officers literally smell something fishy here. And they march in and they seize this fishy liquid, okay? They then sort of kind of wish that they hadn't done that. They sort of wish they had left it where it was, because it stinks out the excise office. And the people who run the excise decide that isinglass, okay, the sturgeon stuff, that's one thing, okay? It's technically illegal, but everybody's always put up with it. But fish skins are obviously illegal. So they decide to prosecute. And it seems like a lot of people are on their side. A few months later, they see some findings at another big London brewery, Calvert's Brewery, where it looks like the same thing is going on. Now the Calvert family, they've got friends in high places, and they soon get the findings released, and it all gets sort of sorted out. But all of this happens in public. Calvert's brewery is down by the River Thames, and a lot of people walking past between the various wharves chat to each other about what's going on. They find out that this has happened, and the following day, the brewers find that somebody has carefully, in the night, somebody's been and left a trail of dead fish, pointing from the nearest public street right out into the house where Calvert's are keeping the findings. So this is not good PR for them. All the big brewers are furious about this sort of thing, but the excise press on and they launch a criminal action against the first of the breweries, Brown and Parry. So I went along to the courtroom in December 1809 to see what was going on. Now, the prosecution case was conducted by the Solicitor-General. The Solicitor-General in 1809 was a man called Sir Thomas Plummer. He's not very well known today. He was best known in his own time. He was an opponent of the abolition of the slave trade. He was an opponent of rights for Roman Catholics. He was an opponent of the extension of the vote. Basically, everything that we've got and he didn't have, he didn't want to have, in a nutshell. And he starts giving this really, really impassioned speech. Of course, he's opposed, as with pretty much everything else, to the possibility that anybody might be allowed to use this new additive in beer. So now I have my digital tape recorder with me, so I've got a recording of that speech. And I'm going to read you a bit of it. See if you can follow, right, there is, hands up when you think you can follow what his point is. He says, putrid fish may be said to be an admirable refiner of beer. Very likely it may, but what then? I do not choose to have my beer fined with putridity. I would rather have it not look quite so fine than have it putrid. That is my taste. But as a matter of law, you cannot put stinking fish into beer. Keep your stinking fish to yourselves. You must not put it into beer. The law does not allow you to put it in. If you like to drink liquor with stinking fish in it, drink it yourselves, but you must not sell it to the public. And if you pretend to find it in this mode, you cannot find it in this mode, and it must not be permitted. Therefore, are you following his argument here? Therefore, it becomes necessary on the part of the public to prevent Messrs. Brown and Parry fining their beer with stinking fish. If they contend they have a right by law to fine their beer with the offals of the fish market because it will fine it, I will not enter into a chemical discussion whether it will fine it or not. It is enough for me to say the law upon the subject will not let you put stinking fish into your beer. There's a bit more like that. He says, I will not enter into an argument on taste. You and some of your customers may say the flavour of it is admirable. It may smell a little, but hold your nose and drink it. It's the finest thing that ever was, and it's admirably good. I will not hold my nose. I won't drink it, because the law says I am not to have any of this stinking stuff put into my beer, and you cannot do it consistently with the law. Do you need me to recap any of that?